Hi everyone, my name is Mang. I'm from DesignCode, and today we're going to learn about the new Framer, which is just launched. So the purpose of this stream is sort of to give you my first impressions as someone who has taught 2 courses in the past, and I've used a lot of design tools, and I sort of know what the expectations are. And so I just wanted to give you my perspective as someone who's never used it before and walk you through as a beginner as well, because everyone is a beginner, right? Like we just started, we just heard about it. Not everyone had the chance to play with it, but also I have some additional impressions from before, like what my expectations are from before. Now, cool website. I mean, the Framer team is just insane at creating these beautiful materials and website, get people excited. I remember the first Framer X launch, it was so exciting. I think that as a tool, it has changed a lot, and it's fantastic at the same time, but it's overwhelming for users, right? Like we have to learn so many new things. A lot of people came from Framer Classic, then Framer X, and then Framer Playground, and now we're at hopefully the culmination of all of those things into one, which is now Framer Web. So if you look at the website, and one thing that I really love about the new approach is that it's extremely accessible, right? It's no longer something that you have to download. You can just sign up and then open it from your website, just like Figma, and everyone loves Figma nowadays. It has amazing collaboration tool. It has great features. It has matured quite a bit, but you have to look at Framer differently. The way I see it is that Framer is different in the sense that it's a lot more focused on prototyping, and it's a lot more focused on code. So this is something that many designers always wanted to get into, but was always scared to learn more about it because there's a huge learning curve to get into this sort of thing. Now, my goal is not to show you the basic thing. I think you can discover it yourself by going to framer.com. My goal is to sort of like walk you through and guide you in terms of like what we can discover together, and perhaps share some of the techniques that I've used in the past. So let's go to example. This is something that I found really interesting, was that they have this example tab, and I can essentially go to any of these examples and open directly in Framer. If you're logged in, you're gonna see the demo right away, and there you go. Like this is insane. This is really good. So you can just play with the preview on the top right, and you can see I can already interact with it. And I believe that this one is codeless, which means that there's no code at all. But, we're also going to explore a little bit of that coding stuff. Now, let's dial back a little bit. Obviously, feel free to explore a lot of these things. And, I just want to take a look at the pricing, because this is something new. It wasn't like this before. Framer didn't have a free plan before. But it does now. So just like Figma, if I'm understanding correctly, Cohen, who's the founder of Framer, he's in the chat. Hopefully I say your name correctly. But like we have a free plan, just like Figma. You have the ability to use, mostly as an individual, to use, I think, as many projects as you want. No, never mind. There's 3 projects that you have limited, and 2 editors, so you can have multiple people. So that's a little bit different. I believe that Figma is limited to 1 editor or something like that, or viewer or something like that. So there's a slight difference between the 2, but as an individual, you're going to be able to try it for free, which is really exciting to me. So all you need to do, click on try for free, and then you land on this page after you sign up with Google, which is 5 seconds of your time. So let's give it a try. Now, once you're logged in, this, believe it or not, is a tool. Just like Figma, the first time I saw Figma, I was like, wow, I can't believe that I can start designing right away from the browser. And I guess I have the same feeling now, because at the end of the day, if you think about Framer, you can start coding right away from the browser. So imagine that. Like, this is not something that we see a lot today, right? Like, we're getting used to being able to design in the browser, but to design and code in the browser at the same time, I think is quite new to a lot of us. So yeah, you can pull it, Windows in the browser, of course. So yes, we have the Framer team that is answering questions. So feel free to ask those questions if you are in the chat. I won't be able to catch up with what everyone is saying, but definitely use this opportunity to ask those questions. I think this is a great thing you can do. Like I said, it's free, so there's no cost to this, and you can learn a great deal about code, about React, a great deal about design at the same time. So let's take a look a little bit at the menu on the left side. So we have resend, we have draft, so that's fairly common. And then we have examples. So this is kind of cool. We can just pull the same examples as from the website, and I believe that I can just open just the same way to these samples, and I will be able to play with it. So you can see I'm able to play with the prototype, and there you go. This one is a horizontal scrolling, and I can click on it. This is super impressive, by the way. This is not easy to do in code. So to be able to do this using a prototyping tool, using a design tool, sorry, is insane. Like, Figma is not able to do this at all. In fact, Figma is extremely limited in terms of what kind of prototype you can do. There's very big limitations on the ability to add delays to your animations, but Framer has all of that for free, and a ton of examples on top of that, as you can see. Now, for those who have used Framer in the past, such as myself, what I'm noticing, perhaps Cohen can help me with this one, is that we don't have the same marketplace anymore. So I cannot open my Framer X documents, and I cannot open my, some of the plugins, if you call it, like sort of community stuff that we started in the past is not available here, from what I understand. Again, Cohen can definitely correct me on this one. So I cannot see any of those awesome small, apps that people were creating that kind of help our workflow a lot. But I guess it seems like a bit of a fresh start here in that department. But at the same time, we have a ton of new features, and from my experience, it seems to be very performant as well. That this is another problem that I have with the Figma prototyping, is that the performance is really bad. Like I've tried to prototype using big stuff like blur and stuff like that, like big resolutions on Figma, and it's just, it doesn't have the frame rate that I'm looking for, that I would need to show to stakeholders, to friends, or even to people in in the community. So yeah, this is pretty awesome. You can see like very sophisticated how do you say, animations and interactions. So you can see like we have this little dot animation from Android, and then it swipes, and then it kind of push the content upwards. So that's really cool, and you can kind of explore the setup of it, and you can see it's not that overwhelming at all. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm mistaken, there is some code here, and you can see that it's taking code by looking at the purple color. I guess if I'm not mistaken again, it's in the normal design components. A design component, it doesn't have any code involved, and a code component, you can see here from the purple, is where you can get into the coding. And so if you want to go and see the code, you can, if I'm not mistaken, I'm gonna go to the inspector. Usually they have sort of like a place where you can edit the code. Oh, or never mind, I think I'm mistaken. This simply means that it's a component, okay? And, but it's cool. I'm able to explore it, and this is hopefully gonna give some feedback to sort of like from a user experience perspective as to what sort of like people might be looking for as they try it. So let me just go back and see another example, and then we're gonna go into starting something from scratch, but I just wanna sort of like look at this a little bit more and then not forget what I wanna do. So pricing examples, let's take a look at the prototype from scratch. So I'm gonna go here and click on new, and I'm going to create a very simple prototype without any coding so far. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm going to press A or frame, which is equivalent to the artboard. I'm going to create a rectangle, and this is where I'm going to change the device layout. This is very similar to Sketch and Figma. I'm able to change it to iPhone 11 Pro, and a very quick setup that I can do is simply like a rectangle, but in this case it's a frame, so I'm going to press F. And I'm going to set, let's say, 300 by 250. I'm going to center it. As you can see, the feeling very similar to Figma. And we're going to set the radius to, let's say, 30. And then we're going to animate it. Are you ready? So I'm going to Command D on this, and I'm going to do the magic move, as we call it affectionately from the days of Keynote. So I'm going to change the state of my animation, and then I'm going to set up the interaction. This is very similar to Framer in the past. So I'm going to select this little handle here, and I'm going to go to the second screen, and then I'm going to set up the transition. So you can see in the inspector we have the interactions as well as the transition that's going on. So you can see that by default we're using the tap gesture, but we also have different more interactions such as tap start, click, mouse down, mouse up, enter, leave. We're gonna get into that as well. But let's start with the tap, and then for the animation, wow, this is actually pretty cool. You can see that I'm able to change the stiffness of my animation. And this is also a window, so I can move it around, and I can also check the preview and click on it. Boom, it creates the transition for me. So this is really cool, and all I need to do to get back is to just click on this little handle to go back, and it already does the default interactions for me, and I can just go back and forth, and it even has uninterrupted animation. So you can see I can just click in the middle of the animation and just move back and forth. So again, really cool stuff. Great job to the team of Figma, Framer. Sorry, I'm always mixing up the two names. But you know, great stuff here. Basic stuff, but still, it looks very solid. We have great frame rates, as you can see. We even have the animation timing that Figma doesn't do very well. So, you know, if you look into the springiness, I'm gonna make it super bouncy. You can see like the little bounciness here. So let's take a look at how it looks like. Ooh, wow, look at this. So yeah, you can definitely play with this, and this translates very well into coding. As you know, Framer is very big on coding aspect, and it even has the frame of motion. So for those who don't know what it is, it's a library for React, and you can essentially use the code part of your Framer design and prototype and use those animation interactions and code into a production website. So this is fantastic, and for a lot of designers that kind of worry about, well, where do my work go after I start designing and prototyping, right? A lot of us who are prototyping in the design tool, in Figma, Adobe XD, and in more advanced prototyping such as Principle, such as Protopie, the big questions that we all have is like, what do we do with our prototypes? Can we use it? Can we use some of the code? Can we create components? And those are really good questions that I think you can ask to the team, and hopefully we can explore that even more today. But I'm a bit limited in my explorations at the moment, so I can only show you sort of like some of the stuff that I'm quite familiar with, such as what you can do so far. And yeah, this is cool. Animation timing. Another thing I want to give it a try. So let's try a button. So I'm going to create a small button, and again, rounded corners. And then we're going to try to make it clickable. So, you know, we do have sort of like the magic move thing, but I want to give it a try at the code components, the overrides. This is something that I've been doing in my course. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select the element, and I'm going to sort of like create a code component, and I think it has to be a frame. Is it a frame, or is it? I'm not able to see the. I'm a bit lost here. I'm not able to create the override. I think, if I'm not mistaken, interaction. I do have an example, so let me go back to my example. So I think this is the one. Okay. And this one, you can see that it has the overrides. Okay, so I have to enable code mode. Okay, good point. So let me just go back to that. So I guess you do have to do something in order to activate the code. So where would I activate the code mode? So code, always show code, I guess. And then I can go to the coding. And then so I did not plan for this, but you know, for those who you know, who have been playing with this, you have to enable the code mode, and if you do, then you're gonna see a new tab that calls code, and this is where you can look at your code. This is really cool. Like I said, you're able to switch between the design and then the code, and here you have a bunch of files, just like in VS Code. You can start your files, and you're gonna be able to sort of like create these functions that you can apply as an override to your elements. So in this case, you know, this can be applied to any element. I could have started like a new element, and if you have enabled the code mode, you're gonna see this little thing called overrides, and this is where you're gonna be able to click on plus. And when you click on plus, you're gonna be able to either create a new file, and I suggest that you do that, because if you do create a new file, they will have some placeholder functions for you. These are already written automatically for you. And the cool thing about this is that it gives you sort of like a template to start with, so that if you have, like, let's say your button here, and you're setting it to you know, 30, and then, you know, you can just like select whatever file that you just created in the code mode. You can see that I have two files, or three files. So app.tsx, which is TypeScript, app1, and then examples. And then from here, since it created automatically for you, then you can sort of like go to the tab frame, which is a function. So if you go to like app.tsx, you have the function called tab frame, and this does something. And then you have another function called rotate frame, and this does another thing, which you can see if you've done a little bit of React, it's able to animate by using rotation. And there's a bit of a change in the code. So for those who wants to kind of learn about this aspect, you know, I do have a course about Framer Playground. Now, I do want to say that I am in the middle of redoing it with the blessing of Cohen. We are able to, you know, but what I want to say is that a lot of this still applies, however, with a little bit of change, because they have changed a little bit their API. So that's why I was able to sort of look at some of these explanations that I did about code override, design overrides. And you can see that I kind of explain a little bit. This is kind of helpful for me as well, as I'm exploring again on Framer Web to see, like, you know, what are some of the differences and what can I reuse. But you can see the code that was there before is not very different from the code that is now, with a slight difference that I saw, which has the props here in the parentheses. But I'm gonna go back to the document. You can see that we have the function, and we're essentially overriding the element, and then we're applying the animation. So another thing that I found that was cool is that while you're coding it, you can see the results in real time, right? Kind of like SwiftUI, which I think is fantastic. So you can see here, I can sort of like set a rotation to 60, and it's going to refresh automatically, and you can see that the angle of the animation is much more sharp as a result. I can set the scale to, let's say, 2 times, and it's going to refresh, and you can see that it's scaling by 2 times. And I'm just setting up the tap frame, which if you go back to the layers, I can just like go to the element, go to override, and this is where I'm browsing for what file that I want to connect this element to, and then from that file to select whatever function that I want to apply the animation, right? So in the rotation, for example, we are able to, let me see, I think you have to sort of like have some sort of an interaction. It's a rotate frame using, it's just an animation, so it's not like while hover. For those who are not aware, while hover is during the hovering interaction, and I guess these are more like if you want to replace the text. Every time that you click on it, then it's going to replace the text. But I think honestly, if I can get you to just play with this simple override today, I think we're already getting pretty far in what you can do with Framer Web. So you can see tap frame. So let's just forget this. I don't want to overwhelm you. Let's just, I think we don't even need this part. And let's just focus on the tap frame, which I think a lot of designers will be very interested in. And then I'm going to go back to layers, and I'm going to make sure that this is connected. Maybe I just deleted too much code. Let me just go back and go back in terms of steps. Okay, for some reason it's disconnected. I'm not sure why. Let me just okay. Okay, for some reason the tap frame just stopped working, so I'm not sure why. Let me try again. Maybe, like I said, I don't want to block us into our demo by something like this. So let me go into the new document. Oh no, this is the same document because that's the latest documents that I opened. Let's go to the other one. Okay, so you can see that code is enabled here, and we're gonna start from scratch again. So I'm gonna go to override. I'm gonna click on new file, and when I do that, it's going to create app.tsx. I'm gonna go back to my layers. I'm going to select, whoops, it's not there. Okay, oh, it's here. So I guess it needs a bit of a refresh. So I'm gonna click on an app, and I'm gonna click on tap frame. If I do that, I can click on the element, and it applies that function. So I think this is the part where it's sort of like it's a bit harder to demo. There was a bit of a refresh that needs to be done. So you can see here I'm able to tap, and now if I go back to my function, you can see that this is what controls the tap frame, and I can change a bunch of things. And so you can see that I can change the scaling to 2, for example. And when I do that, this should be refreshing, and you can see that the scale has changed. Yes, so Koan just explained that maybe the code compiling is a little bit slow, which is why we couldn't see the change that were being made as we were changing the coding. This is something you probably have to keep in mind. But if you're a designer and you want to play with code, I think let's start with this first, And let's play around with some of these settings, and then play around with the examples. So we have while tap, and then we another thing that I really like about the coding aspect, you can also have while hover. So we have like different interactions, and this would be a hover state instead of a tap state. So those are already two key interactions that you can use for your prototype. And it has auto completion, which I think is essential for someone who doesn't code a lot. And scale, as you would guess, you can probably do the same thing as in CSS. So you add comma, and then you can sort of like animate rotate X. So for example, it's probably going to be in degrees. So rotate X by 30, and you can see, if I'm not mistaken, maybe rotate X is not exactly what I'm looking for. Maybe it's rotate, yes. So rotate works. I think rotate is just rotating by itself. There's also rotate Z. I played a little bit with this one. I think it's a little bit the same, but we have scale, we have rotation. I believe we should have translation as well. Yes, translate. And then we can set like 30. So let's see if it's going to refresh, or maybe I'm making something that is not working. Okay, so I guess maybe it's a little bit early to sort of like test the coding aspect in terms of as a live demo, but it does work, but to some extent. I think it's just that it takes a little bit of like know-how. But I did want to show you that you can use the overrides, and that there are like a ton of examples that you can sort of explore. And that you can like use React code. I know that from my experience, we are able to do a lot more than this. Like at this point, we're using overrides. We're also we can use animations. I remember we could use like Lottie animations. We could sort of like code the same thing that you did in HTML and CSS, and I encourage you. There's not a ton of resources on the coding aspect of the new framework web, so it's kind of like SwiftUI all over again. Since last year, because as you know, like SwiftUI when it came out, nobody did anything at that point. So you have to kind of expect that learning curve in the coding aspect, and that is totally normal. But as Cohen said, the magic motion is what I guess is really, really good at this time. As you can see from the first part of the demo, you can essentially, build anything using those amazing like timing curves, and just to be able to sort of transition from this to this second screen, and you can sort of like have a lot more elements. You can have like scrolling. And let me just go back and explore some of that stuff. So swipe here. So I'm going to open this, and I think this is a tutorial, which I kind of found was interesting, where it's kind of like playing a YouTube video, and then you're asked to follow each step of the way, and it's going to pause, and then you go to the next step, and then to the next step. So that's another thing that you can definitely do. Let me see if I can pull one last example. I remember that I saw one with a menu. So the cart list, I think, is the one that I was looking at. Right. So the cart list is pretty interesting. So you can see that you have a list here. Inside it, you have a scroll, and the scroll is connected to this content here, and each content is connected to a new screen. So now you get this really, really good looking prototype, in fact, that typically is very difficult to recreate in code. So you can see that when I select the artboard or the frame, it's going to preview exactly that. And then I'm able to scroll, and then for each of those elements, I'm able to go to the full screen mode, and then I'm able to kind of like get in that scroll context. Again, not easy to do in code, and then go back and forth while having like a back button. So I think this is another really good example to play with, and yeah, give it a try. What I'm gonna do, I'm going to explore a lot more into the coding aspect. We do have a bit of stuff going on that I wish I could show you, but I think for the purpose of the demo, it's confusing a lot of people. But what I can say is that the magic motion aspect is really good, and I want to rework the course so that I can sort of like cover the coding aspect as it gets better with time. Then you're gonna be able to take your prototype to the next level, because at the end of the day, magic motion, as good as it is, coding will always allow you to sort of like close the gap and go 100% of the way. And on top of that, you're going to be able to create code components that are going to be able to use in a production website using the Framer Motion library. So that's it for today. Hopefully you have, it was informative, and hopefully you're going to give it a try. And if you have any questions, Cohen is here. They have a Twitter account. They have a great community behind this tool, and feel free to give your feedback. I'm sure they're going to be happy to answer your questions and receive your feedback and suggestions. So I'll see you next time. Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.